Hey, Josh.
Hi, David. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
Excellent. I'm just trying to silence all my junk here.
Yeah, take a sec. Get
So
your stuff going.
So we are not interrupted. All right.
I'll knock out a couple of things as well.
Silenced. Turn this on. All right. I think we're kind of good. All right. How are things where you are?
Oh, not bad. Just hot. It's that time of year.
Whereabouts are you?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that is hot. That was
How
the
about
last. Yeah, I'm in Toronto.
Oh, nice.
Although it's hot here too. Yeah, Phoenix was the last place I was supposed to go in the before times. I was supposed to speak at the Slack global sales kickoff, and it was in Phoenix, Scottsdale.
Oh, really? Okay.
In March of 2020, and then they canceled it, and I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. I guess they're like a big company and they want to be conservative, because like back then, like people were kind of canceling stuff, but not really.
Right.
And yeah, I never got to go to my sales kickoff, but all good.
Bummer.
Yeah. So tell me about you. Tell me about, I'm always kind of curious to learn about what you do and how this all fits into your business.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that. So I am a account executive for an organization called LeadMD. Actually, we were recently acquired by another organization called Trendline Interactive. But I've been with the company for 7 years, and just, it's a good, you'll see on the show, like a lot of times we talk about product market fit for sellers. And what's really good about where I am is just, it's a good fit for me, right? I'm good at it because I like it and I care about it. Like, we basically sell marketing and sales to marketing and salespeople. So
like Salesforce. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just kind of a cool fit for me, and I get to position myself as an expert, and it never really feels much like selling. It's just, having cool conversations with people and doing that part of it. And, since we're a smaller, we're, with the acquisition, we're a 275 person organization, but prior to that, we were about 50, and the sales organization still to this day is only 4 people. Prior to that, I was one of 2 for the longest time. So, it's not like there's heavy sales management and all this kind of stuff all baked in, which is the stuff I can't stand, which is where this podcast actually came out of. I was telling somebody this yesterday. They asked, well, how did you come up with the name and all this kind of stuff? And I said, well, I was just writing a post on LinkedIn one day, and I said, I often tell people I love selling, but I hate sales. And I wrote this whole post, and then I got all kinds of responses, and I was like, oh, you know what? It's kind of a good idea. And it's an excuse to talk to people. So do this. And the way it fits in is, it just gives me access to people, right? If I want to sell somebody something and I want to get their attention, I can say, hey, you want to be on my podcast? And then we'll shoot the shit and, it'll give me access to somebody. And beyond that, like just talking to people is kind of fun. And I've, since we don't have like a huge sales leadership at our business, I haven't had like sales coaching per se. So a lot of this gives me ideas and things that I can work on and improve on, and stuff I can subtly bring in and out of the business how I want to. Some stuff I like, stuff I don't. And there's a spectrum of that, but it's just, it's good. It's good exposure, right? I think it's more of a learning thing than anything, because you get to expose yourself to more people and their thoughts.
For sure. Yeah. Like that's a common answer, right? There's actually a bunch of podcasts I've been on, which have been AEs and like the guys who do 30 Minutes to President's Club. They're just like reps at companies, and they're like,
exactly.
like, gives us access and helps build our brand. So no, that's great. And look, the headline copy on my website says, do you ever wonder why you don't like talking to salespeople? So I sense will be, so, but I also love sales, right? But I've asked that question to lots of, like, I could be doing a keynote to 1,000 people, and I say, who here likes talking to salespeople? No one puts up their hand, but but we're not bad people,
No,
as far as I know.
As far as you know, some of us might be.
So no, it's a good topic. So what do you typically talk about on the show?
It depends on the person, right? So if it's individual contributors, which frankly tend to perform the best. I don't know why that is, but maybe that's because a lot of people in my network are individual contributors. But we talk about just, what space are you in? How did you find a good fit for you? What is your relationship like with management? How do you balance, being good at your job versus, the expectations of management in terms of metrics and production and those types of things, because oftentimes they're in conflict. So, we talk about those types of things. People really seem to like talking about the difference between, a volume and velocity sales role versus an enterprise sales role, and where you fit, right? Just know that, because sales doesn't necessarily have a graduation path, right? We often think, oh, you're an SDR, then you're an SMB rep, then you're an enterprise rep. Well, maybe you suck at enterprise sales and you're going to be miserable. And having 8 meetings a day and doing high volume 10K or under deals is great for you. And you'll be happy as a clam doing that. I couldn't be, but some people might be, and you got to know yourself a little bit of self-awareness, just understand where you are, where you fit, and what's going to make you feel good about doing it day to day versus just your expectation of, I need to be VP in 10 years because that's the path.
For sure.
I can tell you from experience, sales leadership, I've done it and it wasn't a good fit for me. Maybe at the time, maybe it will be at some point. I don't know, but I'm a lot happier as an individual contributor, just doing my thing.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with that for sure. No, this is good. Look, I mean, I can talk about whatever. I'm pretty versatile. I can talk about whatever you like. Obviously, like I run my own sales training practice built on principles of science and empathy. So, this idea that, hey, look, people love to buy stuff, but they hate talking to salespeople. Like I'm a startup guy. I've done 4 startups, building sales teams, and my third startup, 3 of them actually ended up being acquired, and the third one was acquired by Salesforce. And so I came over with the ship to Salesforce. I spent 5 awesome years there, and I ended up running small business sales for the Eastern US for Salesforce before going on to do startup number 4. And then I started Cerebral Selling just as a website, because I had been doing a bunch of writing and creating content at Salesforce. And then I had all this stuff. So when Josh calls me up and says, hey, David, what do you got for me? I'm like, I'm sending you links to all these places. I'm like, why don't I have my own website?
Yeah, exactly.
So Cerebral Selling was just my website, because I was a research scientist before I got into sales, 20 years ago.
Very cool.
And and then it started to take off. Like people started subscribing. I said, you know what, this is what I love to do. So I set up shop, started my own practice. I trained sales teams mostly at B2B technology, high growth companies. And I wrote a book a year and a half ago. That was part of the Slack meeting that I did not go to in Scottsdale. They bought 600 copies of my book to give out to their reps.
Oh, wow.
And like months later, they were still sitting like in the hotel that they were supposed to, do the event at. Anyway, so I wrote a book. It's called Sell the Way You Buy, and it's doing great. So anyway, so that's. But I'm happy. Like we can talk about any of that stuff, all that stuff. If your audience, I guess, who's your audience? Is it sales reps or is it entrepreneurs? Like who listens?
It's kind of varied. I'm trying to collect that feedback pretty consistently. And I know it's individual contributors for sure, because I get a lot of them like direct messages and be like, oh man, I implemented that thing that guy said. That's super cool. So I know that's there. There's definitely some sales management and some sales leadership, because I've gotten similar feedback. And then my it's funny because I grew doing a lot of like SaaS companies early on, selling into those organizations. So there's a lot of like people that have grown and turned into founders and, startup and that. So there's that group. The people that don't listen are actually the people that I sell to, which is actually kind of funny. I mostly sell in the enterprise, like $1 billion plus companies. And I don't think those people give a rip about that. And which is fine actually, because, my whole philosophy on most of this stuff, whether it's content or, podcasts, whatever it may be, is that it's just a proof point. So, I sell through referral, and, when someone sends a referral, they go and they look me up. And as long as they see that I'm talking about this stuff, like, oh, there's just, one trust barrier broke down. When I get them on the phone, it's just a little bit easier. That's the way I think about it. So, yeah, I don't know if that helps or not, but
yeah, no, and look, it's great. Look, if your audience, I'd say, like, to deliver the most value to your audience, if they're, sales reps and, sales reps who want to learn. I mean, one of the topics we can talk about, like in this, and by the way, the topic of how do you sell if you hate selling, I think there is an angle there, right, for reps, because a lot of times people get into sales through one way or the other, and they go out there and they execute tactics that someone else taught them. I call these in my book, I call them the Cobra Kai tactics, because they're things that your sensei taught you that, you may like, that you don't know why they work or why they don't, but you're just doing because someone told you to. And the problem is, especially with newer young sellers, is that we ask people to do things and then they kind of feel a little gross doing those things. Like, I don't want to call people and bother them. Like, I don't like to be bothered. Right. So how do you overcome some of that? I actually refer to this in my book as experience asymmetry. So this idea, like, it's an imbalance that gets created when a younger, less experienced or newer seller is trying to connect with an older, more experienced buyer whose job they've never done. So like, if you're calling into like VPs of sales at, billion-dollar companies, like, have you done that job before? Like, do you know what they do? It's like, when do you have kids? It's not a
I have 3.
So I have 3 kids too. How old are your kids?
12, 8, 6.
Oh, nice. Okay. So I'm a 15, 13. I should know this, 15, 13, and 9. Nice. So when your kids come to you, like when my kids come to me and they're about to hit me up for something that they secretly think I'm going to say no to.
Right.
You can tell just by the way they approach you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is like this epiphany I had at Salesforce when I was selling small business. So the reps were young, first job kind of out of BDR, and like, I can hear the fear in your voice. So anyways, this is I talk about this in a bunch of podcasts, but don't feel bad. Like, I don't think there's a ton of overlap between all these podcasts I do.
No.
So we can, that might be an angle if you feel like your audience is, like these young reps, new reps who want to learn. And then we can talk about ways of overcoming.
It's funny. I just commented on a post today with that same answer. Like, what do you think the disconnect is between the SDR and the person on the other end of the phone? I'm like, it was one word answer: experience.
Yeah.
They have no fucking clue. Like,
that's it.
I mean, come on.
I'll Zoom chat you if you want to read it afterwards. This is an article I wrote in the HBR a couple of years ago, but it's before the book came out, but I talk about the same stuff in the book.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. So I'm pretty informal. Basically, I'll get us going and I'll say something and get you going, and then I'll riff off of that. And I don't like to set questions or anything like that. So I do like the idea of the buyer experience, just because I just listened to a keynote on it. So it's fresh in my brain. And,
for sure.
And how people buy is different than how we sell oftentimes.
Yeah.
So I might dig into that first.
Oh yeah. I'm game for all that stuff. So I guess we'll go like for about a half an hour. Is that?
Yeah. 25 to a half hour. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
How do I pronounce your name so I get it right?
It's a good question. So it's pronounced Premer. So just pretend it's like PREE, and you'll get through. It's funny because every podcast host asks me that, and then I'd say 15% will still say it wrong once we get into the thing.
David Premer.
There you go. Boom.
And then how do you want me to say CEO of Cerebral Selling, or what do you want me to say?
Well, CEO sounds a little pompous, so you can say
be pompous, bro.
The title actually, my LinkedIn profile is founder and chief sales scientist. So it's people tend to like, CEO is what I call it with, for legal purposes on contracts, but people like the founder and chief.
I always say your title is based on who you need to get in touch with.
Yeah, it's true. Well, look, it's funny in sales. It's sometimes the reverse, where we like to kind of like abstract ourselves from sales titles. Like, I'm not an account executive, because then people think I'm going to put my sleazy sales tactics on them. So I'm like, I'm an inbound marketing specialist, and I'm here to help you with.
I've gotten over that. I don't care. People just say, I'm in sales. I'm like, what's your title? I don't care. I'm in sales.
Yeah. This is a cold call, and you are about to be sold. No.
Yeah, exactly. All right, David. Well, let's get this rolling. Founder, chief sales scientist. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Chief sales scientist. Okay. All right. Welcome to the show. Today, I am joined by David Priemer, who is the founder and chief sales scientist from Cerebral Selling. David, thank you for joining the show. One, and two, I didn't butcher your last name, did I?
It was fantastic. It was a great intro. Thanks, Josh. No, it's great to be with you
Fantastic.
here. Well done.
Well, good. I'm excited to have you. So you've got a book out. Let's get that name of that book real quick, just so it's out there and we can start researching it and Amazoning it and all that stuff right now.
For sure. Yeah, the book is called Sell the Way You Buy, and it's available wherever you buy books, on Amazon, Audible. I was telling a client this morning that, they're saying, oh, can you send me a copy and like sign it for me? I said how my mother sometimes teases me. She'll call me up and she'll be like, David, can you read the audiobook for me now? Like, like a personal experience. Let's start at chapter 2. Anyways,
yes, here's the Audible.
I did read it. If you feel like listening to 6.5 hours of me reading my own book, by all means, go check it out.
I mean, with that silky smooth voice, who wouldn't, right?
Oh yeah, no kids. Like the late, what Chris Voss calls like the late night FM DJ voice.
That's right. Put on the late night DJ voice. How am I supposed to do that?
There you see, you're well read. Well done.
Exactly. No, I love that book. It's very good. Well, I imagine I'm going to love yours just as much, but sell the way we buy. I think that's a great concept, even just in the title. So I just listened to a keynote recently and someone doing all this research, throwing all these numbers at me, that people, almost 50% of people, have given the choice, would like to have a repless, purely digital sales experience. What do you think of that?
Look, there's a couple thoughts here. I mean, firstly, if you go ask an average salesperson, do you like talking to salespeople? The answer is going to be no. And we know this from, from not just anecdotally, but from research as well.
Yeah.
But the way I kind of think about selling the way you buy, certainly there's an empathetic component to it. So, hey, look, I know you don't want to talk to a salesperson. I know you've done all the research before you've even called me. But to me, the biggest thing about like selling the way you buy is really thinking about, as a consumer, as a customer, how do we make purchasing decisions? Because ironically, it's one of those things that we don't often think about, from the software we buy, the technology, the cars, the clothes, to what you ate for lunch today, is all driven by the same force, which is feelings. And the funny thing about feelings is that it's all very well and good to say, oh yeah, we're all like emotionally driven. But the way feelings work in our brains is that it's very transparent to us. Like like, for example, you're walking down a street and you're trying to go home and you see a dark alley and you say to yourself, I shouldn't go there. Like, in fact, you don't even say that to yourself. Right. It's just an automatic, danger should avoid. And it's the exact same thing when we're buying, everything, every decision we make is feelings based. But a lot of people don't, especially as sales professionals, don't focus on that.
Yeah, I certainly think that people have to feel something in order to make that leap in that transaction. But how often do you see then that the logic gets in the way of the feelings? Because I feel like there are people out there in the buying cycle, right? If they're committed, they feel something that feels really great. And then all of a sudden, like, someone steps in. It's almost like the little guy at you got the angel and the devil on the shoulder, and the devil's like, wait a minute. Do you really trust those feelings? Do you really trust that guy? How do you balance that? Because I do see that in cycles, right? Like, you get them to feel something, but then almost logic steps in and is like trying to play bad cop.
Right. Well, the tricky thing is in the big complex sales cycles that you probably get involved with, there's multiple stakeholders, and kind of the more people that get involved in the sale, the more the kind of the emotional impact of any one person sometimes gets defrayed. Right. Like
that's a great point.
Like, I might have this big, crazy idea, and my wife will be like, no, do we have to do that? And my kids will be like, no, like, let's do this instead. And all of a sudden my emotion starts to dissipate a little bit.
Right.
But it can also be the reverse, right? Like, we as a team are in the selection process for a piece of technology, and we all are, we're all kind of level headed, and we make this decision. Right. And then the executive comes over the top and says, you know what? No, this is really risky what you're doing here. Let's just go buy IBM, because they're the,
because I'm not going to get fired for buying IBM.
Well, that's the whole thing. No one ever got fired for buying IBM.
Or
has
Accenture,
nothing to do with, whatever the big thing in your space is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that that's the best solution. It's just that when you think about, like, so what's the feeling you're buying when you buy IBM? Well, it's safety and security. I don't want to get fired, right? Like, if let's say I had a data breach at my company and now I'm in the market for IT security software, and there's this really cool, young, innovative company with this leading edge solution. And I'm thinking to myself, look, I'd love to go with this, but if it screws up, I'm going to get fired. I should just go with like the name, it's more expensive and it's probably the rollout's going to be crappy and slow and we're not going to get the personal attention, but at least I'm not going to get fired, right? So, but these are the things, like when someone asks you, why did you pick that solution? You're not going to say, oh, I was really worried about getting fired, right? Or, I went for the most expensive because I'm a premium guy and I love the premiums, or like I'm a cheapskate and I went for the cheapest because like they're all the same, all emotions.
Well, what's crazy about this, like as I'm listening to you talk, right, there's this huge narrative out there that, salespeople suck, right? And especially in the B2B SaaS world, you're just getting inundated with young and inexperienced sellers who don't know their way around a business. They don't know what a P&L looks like. There's an experience gap. We talked about this in show prep, right? If you're a 21-year-old SDR out of college and you're calling on a 45-year-old VP of sales, why don't they connect? Well, they don't know that the experience gap is huge, right? Well, now you're throwing in this whole product thing we need to learn. We need to learn how to, now you're bringing in like emotional behaviors of people. How do we teach this, right? Now we're a whole nother layer of human emotion and psychology that we need to layer in as a seller. How are we getting that education?
For sure. Well, like, first of all, I have to say this is the reason, exactly what you just articulated. This is the reason why we pay salespeople who do this really well a lot of money to do this successfully and not high school students minimum wage, because it's hard, right?
Scream
it's
it
hard.
Louder. Scream it louder.
Yeah. There's so many, like, this is a hard job. It's so many variables. And certainly in the, it's one thing if you're selling like something that comes out of a squirt bottle. Oh, it's like a mold control or whatever it is. But in the space when we're working with B2B technology, which no one really needs technology. Life was good before it, it'll be good after it. We all made it work, right? So how do we overcome that imbalance, first of all, but also like articulate what we do when there's like a million other products that kind of all sound the same? And it's this is like a real big problem. To your question though, like how do we learn this stuff? The headline, as far as emotional intelligence goes, a lot of it, it's just simple pattern recognition. So for like, I'll give you an example. So let's say in the sales game, we train our sales reps to go out and, we want to kind of bant our customers to death, right? We go through the discovery and I say, so Josh, I need to figure out like what's your budget for this, project or the solution. So I say, so Josh, like, can I just ask you, what's your budget for this project? It's like, imagine like you walk into a car dealership and the salesperson comes to you and says, welcome, sir, ma'am, you're looking for cars. Like, what's your budget for this car? Like, it's like saying like, who's the signer? Josh, how much money do you make? How many sexual partners have you had? Like all these questions.
That's a good one.
These are what I refer to as contentious questions, because whenever we get asked these kind of questions, all of a sudden, like the guard goes up and we're like, why is Josh asking me what my budget is? And if I tell Josh, what's going to happen? Is he going to write this in his CRM somewhere? Is he going to like lowball me, highball me? Like, and so we become very defensive. But the funny thing is, like, we actually train people, salespeople, just find out what the budget is, but we don't actually train them in how am I going to extract?
How do you get that information?
Yeah, it's like I have it on my list. And then once I get it, how do I know it's the right thing? So one of the things that, I talk a lot about is just, this idea of empathy, which is, okay, when you get asked one of these contentious questions, what goes on in your mind? And all of those questions that why are they asking? What are they going to do with it? And so one of the simplest tactics I teach when I do my discovery training is I teach people to just append whenever you ask a contentious question, recognize that it's contentious and append your question with the phrase, the reason I ask is because, right? Josh, how much money do you make? The reason I ask is because this podcast gig looks awesome. And I'd love to maybe do something like that one day, but I don't want to take a pay cut from what I'm doing now. Like, am I taking a pay cut, Josh? And now you're like, oh, great. I have context, what's your budget for this project? Like, the reason I ask is because a lot of my clients don't have budget set aside for this kind of technology purchase. And if that's the case with you, don't worry, like I can help you. I'm just trying to get a sense for where your head's at. So like these kinds of emotional intelligence, pattern recognition, awareness stuff, this is how we help, salespeople become more aware of how to execute their sales motion.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because in our world, right? Like I sell consulting, so nothing's etched in stone. It could be anything. Well, how much does this cost? I don't know. I mean, how much money do you have? Right. It's one of those types of scenarios, but I like to use that exact terminology when asking about budget, because I say the reason I ask is because whatever I tell my team, they're going to put the absolute best solution forward they possibly can. And if they don't have parameters to play within, you're going to get $1 million solution put in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's just something like, oh God, that's a great point. Yeah. Certainly don't have $1 million, probably something between 100 and 150K would be a little bit better. Oh, interesting. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's just amazing how disarming it is when you say, this is what you're going to get if you don't help me figure it out.
That's it. Well, like all the tactics that we use in sales are kind of like that, where we do them because, I talk about this in my book. I refer to them as the Cobra Kai tactic. So I'm 46. I was born in 1975. So I was 9 when the Karate Kid movie came out, but people know it now, with the show, the rebirth. Right. And like the way I kind of think about the Karate Kid is you have these like jerk kids, right? These bully kids from the Cobra Kai dojo. And I believe, just like bad salespeople, like they're not bad people. Bad salespeople are not bad people, right? They're good people.
Are people too.
They're people too, right? And these bully kids, they're kids, right? But they learned from a sensei who they put their faith in, who taught them the wrong way. And so, it's the same thing in sales. Like even bad salespeople or bad sales leaders, not bad intention for the most part, right? But we go out, no. We teach our reps. We say, okay, here's the list of stuff you need to get on the discovery call. Ask the person these questions. And when they ask you, well, what is it that you do at your company? Like, here's some great content from our product marketing team that describes, well, we're a platform, we're a consulting firm that specializes in, and like, no one cares because that's not the way people buy. Like people don't buy, oh, we're a platform. No one's out there looking for a platform, right? People have problems, and to the extent that we can inject some of this empathy into modern sellers so they understand the mechanisms by which human beings make purchasing decisions, we can help them align their sales motion in a very human feeling way without it feeling like I'm selling anyone.
Totally. It's so funny you say that. I remember early on in my career, I'm on the phone with a prospect and I'm basically going through the questionnaire of things I need to know. Right. And it's not qualification questions. It's more like, tell me about your business questions that help do this and that. Right. And this guy stops me and he says, Josh, your questionnaire is not helping me at all right now. You need to come up with a new approach. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, that's
like just completely called out. It was such a great moment though. Right. You just get punched in the face. I wish more people would do that. Right. Just tell you when you're screwing up and what's going to be better for you. Right. And it was just an experience I'll never forget. And it's along the lines of what you're saying, right? Like our questionnaires are this or that, everything. It doesn't matter. Like nobody cares. How do you make them feel something is something I'm super interested in. I think that's great.
That's it. Look, and you know what? The bar is, I hate to say, I wish I didn't have to say this. The bar is so low, right? Like people already hate you because you're in sales. Like you're the enemy right out of the gate. So if you can, the bad news is if you start exemplifying and using the tactics that customer associates with like sleazy salespeople,
right?
Like it takes like a fraction of a percent of those crappy old tactics for them to flip the switch in you and think, well, you're just like everyone else.
And shut it down. Yeah.
That's shut it down. But if you start doing like the good things, like you're on the customer side, there's no pressure, you're in the right mindset. They don't feel like you're trying to close them to meet your month-end quota.
Sure.
And you're creating this great experience. Interestingly enough, it's you and I are kind of similar in that we sell to, sales leaders and sales leadership, and, we have experience in that area.
Yeah.
And, I remember some of my clients will actually tell me, and this is actually, and regardless of what you sell, this is relevant to you too, is they'll say, hey, you know what, David, like one of the reasons why we decided to go with you is we just liked the sales cycle with you. And we thought, well, if David can help our reps create this kind of feeling with our customers, well, that's good, right? And so in the end, like they're buying a feeling, and this as well. Like you might, for example, you walk into a car dealership, and there's a lot of car dealerships for that brand, and you have a crappy experience, and what do? You leave to go to the one down the road,
right?
Same
it's
car.
The exact same product,
yeah. So we buy based on what I call we buy based on experiences. The experience is the product, and we have the ability in the sales cycle to create these amazing experiences for our customers.
Well, and so going back to that keynote that I mentioned at the beginning of the call, right? That's one of the data points that they brought out, that there's so little product differentiation in the market. If my service, your service, the MarTech landscape, whatever it may be, right? I have competitors, you have competitors, the whole thing. what's that one thing we can differentiate on as a seller? If they're already telling us they want to go digital, they don't want to deal with people. Well, if there's a way we can differentiate on that experience and that feeling, then that might set you apart.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. Sometimes we overvalue the product. Like we think our product is this delicate snowflake,
So
and
great.
it's so great. It's so different than everyone else's. And you know what? Maybe you're right. But as a customer, I don't care, because I spend a fraction of a percent giving a shit about what it is that you do at your company.
Right.
I got my own problems. So to be able to have a good product, but also differentiate based on the experience, that, like I said, the experience is the product. And to our customers, all of these products just mostly sound the same. Right. And so it's actually very simple. But I'd say, simple to understand, sometimes hard to do when you got the pressure of the quota behind you.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. I've talked to a lot of really good folks on the show who have, and we've had this conversation that you can win on your sales process, right? So then now talking to you, it begs the question, how do we design a sales process that's all about creating the best possible experience?
Mm-hmm.
Is that some of the work that you're doing in your business? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like when it comes to, the sales process, and again, I mean, I've run sales teams at startups.
Yeah.
I worked at Salesforce for 5 years. So, kind of seeing the big sales machine.
Plenty of process there.
Lots of process. And it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I say I'm Canadian, so I say process.
Yeah, I get it.
Hopefully you can understand my accent. But the difference is that when you think about like how people buy, we as salespeople try to kind of take this like very, we're going to bring the product to the customer. We're going to explain why we're better, and they're just going to absolutely fall in love with us.
Right.
And like the reality is, like, a lot of times customers don't know how to buy products like ours,
Right.
especially if we're selling something new and innovative and unique, which oftentimes in the current marketplace we are. One of the things I talk about, not in the book, but since the book came out, I've written a bunch of content on my blog, which I'll drop later. It's totally free. You just go to it. Is this idea of being prescriptive. Mm-hmm. And like leading the customer through the process, because sure, when I go buy a car, all right, I look at the car, I kick the tires, I go for a test drive, pretty straightforward. But when I'm going to buy an innovative consulting service or piece of technology that I've never used before,
right,
I don't know what the best way to evaluate that. I don't even know the questions to ask. So to the extent that the sales team can kind of lead me through my process to their product rather than bringing the product to me, they will ultimately be more successful, because they're gonna do what I call shape the journey. They're gonna shape their journey. And a lot of customers, because they're trying to be very standoffish with salespeople, they're not forthcoming in terms of admitting that they don't know what they're doing when they're evaluating a product. Yeah. So it's on us, right, to kind of bring the future to them and show them the best way to look at how they purchase these innovative solutions.
And what's great about that is, like, honestly, that's in line with how familiar I am with the Sandler methodology, right?
Yeah.
Oh, these are the things that you might want to ask, right? Like when you're talking about evaluating competitors, oh, you might want to ask your competitor about X, Y, Z. So you're kind of, guiding them through the process and helping coach that experience, because I can't tell you, maybe the single most common phrase from a prospect in my world is, I don't know what I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually good for you,
right?
Because now you can step in and be, I hate the term trusted advisor, but you could be that person.
Sure.
But, oftentimes, like I remember my third startup. So what did we do? We were a feedback coaching and recognition platform for employees at work to help them get more feedback, coaching, and recognition. But, later we kind of flip the script to say, hey, look, we work with companies who realize people want lots of feedback and they hate performance reviews, because that was like the big thing. But sometimes we would engage with a company and they would say, hey, David, we love what you're doing. We're into it. We're going to go through this RFP and we're going to give you all our requirements of things that we need. And we would look at these requirements and we're like, this is like old school shit that we don't do on purpose.
Right, exactly.
Because that's what we're trying to get away from. And so we would often have to kind of stop these evaluations and say, hey, look, we'll pull a Ricky Bobby and say, look, with all due respect, if this is what you want, you should go buy something else. Right. If what you want is really what you say you want, we're happy to work with you to kind of reframe these requirements, because this is what we do all day, every day, is we work with innovative companies to bring them into the future. You have not bought this kind of product or service in some time. It's like me going to the suit menswear store and buying formal wear, and I'm like, look, I haven't bought a sports jacket in a few years, and so they're showing me all the latest cuts and fabrics and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know what I don't know. So as a customer, I kind of have to be open to that but I'm not going to be open to it. I'm going to be very closed off and standoffish if I feel the salesperson I'm talking to is really just trying to squeeze me and not be helpful.
Yeah. It's, you know, I haven't even thought about this until you said that, but that's got to be really tough for like enterprise procurement, because the marketplace is moving faster than they could possibly ever move. Right. So they've just got a bunch of templates on the shelves for, oh, here's the consulting template. Here's the software template. Here's the HR. You know what I mean? There's all these different templates that they're pulling off. That's got to be really difficult because, you know, everyone wants to compare apples to apples. It's freaking impossible. Right. Unless you're doing something that's, you know, a CRM, I guess, maybe. Right.
But even still,
even then, right. Yeah. I don't know.
You get into the emotion. So it's like, okay, like for in all fairness, I was a Salesforce customer a few times before I worked, you know, for Salesforce.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I thought about it, you're starting a company, you're saying to yourself, okay, like what should I use for my CRM? All right, like Salesforce. And why? Was it the most beautiful and fully functional CRM? Like, no, you know, but hey, look, I know it's the standard. I know it'll be able to grow with me. I know that they're going to be innovative. And you know what? They do a lot of great things in the community for equality and diversity, all these kinds of, which I buy into.
Yeah.
Sold, right? Like I'm not looking at the nuts and bolts. And in fact, if I looked at the nuts and bolts, I might be like confused and you know, and kind of catapulted into the past, right? Yeah. So like I said, a lot of it just comes down to feelings and emotions.
Yeah. I mean, you want your business to scale, don't you?
That's right. Well, you know what? There are companies who, you know, having sold a small business at Salesforce, like that's what I used to do.
Okay.
There are what we would call forever small companies, you know, companies who have no ambition of growing, and that's okay.
True.
And they might look at Salesforce and say, well, this is kind of expensive. And we might say, well, look, if you're planning to not grow and stay the same, which is fine, then like maybe this isn't for you. Right.
And I mean, listen, I hate when sales leaders or an organization or whatever, because of the pressure of a number, don't give people the power to say no, because that just perpetuates the badness of the seller, right? If you're not a fit, identify it. And if you identify it for them and tell them, how much better off are you in the long run?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I'll tell you. So in my last 2 VP of sales roles, I noticed this startling trend, which was when I looked at the amount of time we were spending in the discovery phase of sales cycles for deals that we ended up winning versus deals that we lost. Now I get when you lose the deal, you don't get all the way through, but at least hopefully you get through discovery.
Yeah.
I found we were spending 3 times longer in the discovery phase of sales cycles. We ended up losing than winning. So I say, you know, we were spending more time losing. So I say, you know, if you want to win more, lose fast. Yeah. But losing fast requires you to put yourself in this mindset of like, not everyone's a good fit and I shouldn't make them. And to your point, you know, I should give people the option to say no, because if they don't feel that pressure from me, they're more likely to self-select out and actually tell me no versus ghost on me, which is the worst, right? Because I just kicking that forecast down the street. But I want them to tell me no. But also, if they always feel that they, at any point in the process, can back out and tell me no, they're just going to be more honest with me and more comfortable, right? And so that's really important. The trick with that as a tactic, though, which I love, is this idea, like you can't use it too soon. So for example, let's say I'm calling you, Josh, and I'm like, oh, hey, Josh, it's David calling from Cerebral Selling. I know I'm just calling you out of the blue. Do you have a few minutes to chat? And if the answer is no, that's okay too. That's too soon. I haven't added any value. There's no reason. I'll take that out every time if you give it to me. Right. But if it's at the end of a discovery, different story.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And one of the things that I think about when you're doing, you know, the 2 student thing, yeah, I didn't think about it that way. But one of the things that's interesting is you see a lot of chatter on LinkedIn and whatnot around playing the long game. But I don't think anyone ever defines what that really is or what that really means, right? Oh, play the long game. Okay. Well, as a 21-year-old or 25-year-old who needs to hit a number, what does play the long game mean, right? Your point of reference is kind of messed up. But I do think the ability to identify fit and say no and build a relationship with somebody regardless is playing the long game.
For sure.
Right. Like that, to me, that's like the simplest definition. Because if you stay in the game, if your plan is I'm going to be a career sales professional, that shit's going to come around.
Absolutely.
Like
well,
they're going to end up at somewhere that maybe is a fit. They might remember you like that. That's the stuff to me that defines the long game.
it's true. Like if you can set aside your ego for a second in your quota and you play the long game, like in my experience over 20 years, like the long game works out, right? Like I have people
Totally.
call me up who say, oh, I saw you speak at Dreamforce 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And then, and here's the other thing, and this is like a thing, and I don't want to quote this guy. So there's a guy on YouTube and he trains car sales. He's an older guy. He trains car salespeople. Now,
Okay.
like, I don't want to give him any air. He's not a bad guy. For whatever reason, he puts a bunch of his training online, and I find it strangely intriguing to watch
Yeah.
how he trains modern car salespeople.
But it's a little cringeworthy, I'm guessing.
It's a little cringe. Well, it's,
Yeah.
because we can picture ourselves sitting on the other side of these. It's like, here's how you fold the paper. Here's how you present it to the person when they say, oh, I want more money for my trade-in. Anyways, but there is one thing that I'll kind of synthesize out. He says, you know what, like the bad salespeople do, who sell cars, who want referrals, right? They sell you the car, and Josh, you're in your car and it's delivery day and you go pick it up and you're really excited.
I'm
And
pumped
it just, you're pumped. And right as you're about to drive your car off the lot, I say, hey, Josh, do you're happy with your car? Was it a good experience? Do you know anyone else who's looking to maybe buy a car? Maybe send them to old David here. And you just want to get the hell off the lot and enjoy your car. And you're not thinking about this stuff, right? And so maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the line, someone needs a car. I'm not going to be top of mind for you. He's like, you know what the best salespeople do? He says, they stay in their customers' lives, and not like I'm not parked in the van across the street in a creepy way, but imagine in our context, right? You're not ready to buy from me, or it's not a good fit at the moment. I say, hey, look, it's no problem, Josh. Hey, look, every now and then I do come across some helpful resources that, probably would be valuable to someone in your role. I'm happy to just share them, and look, reach back out anytime. And then I follow up every now and then, not with, oh, Josh, are you ready to buy now? Is it time? But just like with helpful resources, I kind of stay in your life in a good way.
Right.
And maybe it's, I add you to my email list, or you're on my blog, or I send you an article, or whatever it is. And then when you're ready to buy, I've just always been there. And I do like that. Right. And that's the best way to do it.
And frankly, that's what I think the value of the stuff we're doing right now is. Right. And I know people make all kinds of money off of LinkedIn, and this is my acquisition funnel and blah 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 blah. And I think I told you this in prep. That's not how I see it. Right. To me, everything's a proof point. And if I talk to somebody and they look me up, they see, oh, he talks about this stuff. It's cool. It's good. Maybe this conversation comes up in a sales conversation down the road, and I can say, oh, dude, you should listen to this podcast with David Priemer. I'll send it to him. Well, now we both have something that's an artifact that could come around later in the day. And that's how I see all this stuff, right? Like, it's not necessarily some, massive demand funnel that I'm building. It's just more of a bunch of proof points that hopefully help down the road.
Just being human. That's it. And the funny thing about what you just described, which is bang on, is that if you're the marketing department, how are you quantifying the attribution of, when the deal came in, because it was of Josh's, helpfulness over the course of, 2.5 years of a podcast and a note, and then he popped up in someone's feed. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember Josh. He's actually a pretty good guy. And like, how do you quantify that? Right. And that's actually why kind of the funnel management aspect of sales is so difficult. The way I kind of think it, just forget all that and just be human, just be helpful, right? And help lead your customer through the process, add value to them, and you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. It's funny you mentioned attribution, and I won't spend too much time on this, but I had the founder of dreamdata.io on, right? And it's an attribution tool. And he's so funny because the first thing he says is like, we just made this stuff up. Like, it's going to be wrong 50 to 80% of the time, but you should know some of what's working, right? And like, he was super honest about it. And I think that, like, I don't know if that mentality trickles down to his sales team, but it probably should, because I think that's somewhat disarming for people, right? Like,
for sure. Look, what we all like to think there's like this big master plan, and if we do this and juice this metric and create this funnel this way, that like the business will grow. And yet there's this other philosophy, like for me in my business, I actually, I have Google Analytics, I have, email tracking and all this kind of stuff. I don't have time to deal into all that. And to be honest, I've been accused as recently as a couple of days ago of giving away way too much for free. Like, David, you don't have to do all this. Just put it behind a paywall, or like just have people give their email address, for crying out loud, and instead of giving it away. But I'm like, I can't be bothered to figure out, too much time to figure. I'm happy to help
Yeah.
and give stuff away, and
That'll come back around.
it'll come back around.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it always does. All right. Well, let's give it to us. The blog, you mentioned it. Let's do the book again. Give us, where's everyone going to find you and learn more about cerebral selling?
Yeah, well, the free treasure trove of stuff is just cerebralselling.com. So I have a blog there, which again, it's all ungated. You can sign up for my email list. I do put out an email once a week with new content.
Okay.
I have a YouTube channel called Cerebral Selling as well, which you can subscribe to if you like. And the book is called Sell the Way You Buy, and you can get it on Amazon, Audible, wherever you buy books. You can check it out.
Fantastic. David, thank you for joining the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure, Josh. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All righty.
And we're done.
Stop here.